Okay, this is APUSH Chapter 6, Part 1. Um, a very short period of time that we're going to cover in this chapter, but an insane amount of material and acts and legal mumbo jumbo. But we're going to try to at least get a big picture of one of the most tumultuous times in American history, of course, in the steps to the founding of our great country. Kind of a brief overview. This is a time period when Britain is seeking to reform their colonial policy. A lot of this is due to the financial debt caused by the French-Indian War. Remember, salutary neglect. Colonists have gotten used to ruling their own matters. They're not really anxious for Britain to come in with a heavy hand, telling them what to do, how to act, and especially pay attention to the economic side of things, because the almighty dollar plays a huge role in us rebelling against the mother country. It's a time period where native British people living in Britain, many of them look at the American colonies and they don't even view them as English. The American colonies are a place full of immigrants from the Dutchlands, from Germany, from many other European nations, and many of these British kind of have that snobby, they're not truly British, but the American colonists, and it's important for you to remember, the American colonists most definitely view themselves as British subjects. They are British. They do not, up until the very, very end, do not think of themselves as anything but British subjects. There's no concept of America. Okay, we're going to focus on three areas here. We're going to talk about imperial reform, the dynamics of rebellion, and lastly, the road to independence. Keep in mind while we're going through here and while you're going through your text and making your notes, ESPG, the economics, social, political, and geography of matters. Okay, starting with imperial reform. Remember, salutary neglect has been replaced. Britain needs money to help pay off the massive debt from the French-Indian War. The British and American generals, and this is really, the French-Indian War is like really the first we actually meet real British people. There's 30,000 British troops stationed in America, and for the first time, colonials are subject to the true differences between them and British subjects, people from Britain. They don't like it. Colonial troops view British troops as slaves to their officers. They see them as uppity and snobbish to them, and the British are not impressed with the colonials at all themselves. So there's a massive, massive cultural difference. It's a cultural difference that we really didn't think existed. At least the colonials didn't. Colonials thought they were British. Now they've met real British people and they realize, oh, well, we are a little bit different than them. There were many British economic tactics that are going to basically backfire and lead us down a road of civil war here. Their tactics hurt colonial merchants, and colonial merchants, they play pivotal roles in colonial matters. They didn't want bread getting to their French rivals. Colonials were trading with the French, who the British were fighting, so they cut that off, and of course that has ramifications. King George III makes a disastrous mistake in deploying 10,000 peacetime British soldiers to the American colonies. The French-Indian War is over. Britain has won. They win Canada from France. But they want to make sure that those French-Canadians don't rebel. They want to make sure that the Indians don't rebel. They want to make sure that colonials are abiding by the Proclamation of 1763, which says that there's no settling west of the Appalachians. That one's already gone. They're not going to get that. But King George, a little out of touch here, sends these peacetime troops. They're poorly paid. You'll see that plays a role down the line. The Prime Minister at this time is a man by the name of George Granville, who is very unsympathetic towards the colonies. And he says, hey, listen, British subjects are actually taxed 5 times more than British subjects in the colonial Americas. He says, so let's get the new revenue to pay off our national debt from the colonies. Well, the colonies are used to salutary neglect. They're used to being able to run their own affairs. They're used to the low taxes. They're not happy with Grenville's new attack on them. So he's going to pass a series of acts that really start amping up colonial resistance to this new British imperial reform. One of the first ones he passes, Currency Act. We're not going to go into a lot of detail on it here. We can discuss that more in class. The Sugar Act, disastrous results there, of course. It affected Boston smugglers, these men who become very, very rich, trading molasses with the French. They're not willing to give up with that money. One of the big sticky points with the Stamp Act was, before, if you were caught smuggling, you were tried in a court of your peers, which were colonials who tended to be sympathetic towards your cause. But now the British are saying, no, you're going to be tried by a Vice Admiralty Court, which is all British people, not from America, if you will. Which meant that the smugglers were, for the most part, going to be convicted, whereas before they typically walked. And many smugglers are some of your upstanding people in society, so very big deal here. Colonists struggle. Again, they struggle with this change from salutary neglect to this imperial reform. And an argument of representation arises. Hey, we need to have representatives in Parliament to work for us. The British counter by saying you have virtual representation. There are British people over there who are kind of representing the colonies, but it's an argument of semantics, and it's not going to go away. Okay, that pretty much covers, and there was a quartering act passed saying that the colonists had to pay for the quartering of British troops. The colonists are like, we don't want British troops anyway, and now you're making us pay for them to build barracks and stuff like that. Again, a disastrous idea of the Prime Minister, Charles Grenville. Okay, so that's imperial reform. We'll come back with part 2, and we'll talk about dynamics of rebellion.